Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the Voice Ogre bringing you another script written by people, voiced by people, for people. Before we get into the video today, I want to ask to make sure that you're subscribed. If you're not, it is free, and it will let you know whenever we upload a new video. Without any further ado. The chamber of the Virexian hegemony was stark and functional, its high walls and sharp angles reflecting the cold, calculated nature of its rulers. Queen Zalath sat on her throne, elevated above the court. Her iridescent carapace shimmered faintly in the low green light, and her multifaceted eyes swept over the gathered advisors with measured disdain. Queen Zalath's mandibles clicked softly, the only sound in the tense room.
"The Terrans think diplomacy is a shield,"
she said, her voice low and sharp.
"They hide behind words, alliances, and treaties. Believing such things make them strong. It is an insult to true power."
An advisor to her left spoke hesitantly.
"Your Majesty, the Terrans have demonstrated a troubling ability to endure. Their species adapts quickly, and their alliances with the Saranai and the Greys have given them leverage. Direct confrontation may silence,"
Zalath hissed, cutting him off.
"Adaptation is not strength. It is survival. And survival is not power. They prattle on about resilience, and yet they cower in the face of true might."
She leaned forward, her claws gripping the edges of her throne.
"We must remind them of their place."
Zixthar inclined his head, his tone calm but laced with malice.
"There is a way, Your Majesty. A way to expose their fragility without the need for open confrontation."
Zalath tilted her head, her gaze narrowing.
"Speak."
"The Krathor Feast," Zixthar said. "A tradition reserved for the elimination of pretenders and rivals. Its components are designed to overwhelm even the strongest physiology. To a Terran, it can be presented as an act of hospitality, a gesture of respect."
The chamber grew silent. The Krathor feast was no honor. It was a trap. The dish, with its searing spices, corrosive acids, and lethal salt levels, was a death sentence for anyone unprepared. Amongst the Virexians, it had been used to dispose of rivals too bold to refuse the deadly offering. To adapt it for a Terran would require precision, but the message would be unmistakable. Zalath's antenna twitched.
"The feast has never been offered to outsiders."
"That is why it is perfect,"
Zixthar replied smoothly.
"The Terrans see diplomacy as strength. Let them eat their words. When their envoy fails, their allies will see their so-called resilience for the lie that it is. And if they survive?"
Another advisor asked cautiously. Zixthar's mandibles clicked faintly.
"They will not. No one has."
Zalath leaned back in her throne, considering the proposal.
"Prepare the feast,"
she said finally.
"Let the Terrans believe it is an honor. They will choke on our goodwill."
Zixthar bowed deeply.
"It will be done, Your Majesty."
As he turned to leave, Zalath addressed the court, her voice cold and commanding.
"The Terrans hide behind their words, but words are air. True strength is not spoken, it is felt. Let this envoy be the first to learn the cost of their arrogance."
The advisors raised their claws in unison, their mandibles snapping in acknowledgement. Zalath's multifaceted eyes gleamed as she watched Zixthar disappear into the shadows.
"Let us see,"
she murmured,
if their resilience can endure true strength.
The Terran council chambers were bathed in the soft glow of strategic displays, their holographic projections flickering above the crescent-shaped table where the counselors sat. At the center of their attention was a message, its stark Phyrexian crest displayed in sharp relief, a rigid, angular design that exuded authority and precision. The accompanying text was formal, yet cryptic, an invitation addressed to humanity. Counselor Patel cleared her throat, her voice measured but firm. The Phyrexian hegemony has extended an official dinner invitation to one of our representatives. The stated purpose is to strengthen interspecies relations, though I suspect their motives are more layered. Counselor Huang leaned forward, tapping the edges of his datapad.
Layered is putting it mildly. The Phyrexians don't do hospitality without an angle. What's their play here?
Perhaps they're testing us, Counselor Osai interjected.
Or gauging how far they can push us.
Either way, declining would send the wrong message. They want to see how we react, Patel agreed, her gaze steady. Which means we need to choose our representatives carefully. Someone who can navigate the subtleties of Phyrexian diplomacy and maintain composure under pressure. All eyes turned to Captain Morgan Reeves, seated quietly at the edge of the room. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture relaxed, and her gaze carried the sharpness of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. Captain Reeves, Patel said, gesturing towards her. You've handled delicate first-contact situations before. Your adaptability and poise make you the obvious choice. Reeves met Patel's gaze with a faint smile. I'm honored, Counselor. What's the objective? Patel folded her hands neatly on the table. Engage with Zixthar, their diplomat, over a formal dinner. Your goal is twofold. Gather intelligence on Phyrexian culture and intentions, while presenting humanity as composed, respectful, and resilient. Resilient, Reeves repeated, her smile deepening. Got it. Anything I should know about their cuisine? Counselor Osai chuckled lightly. That's the wild card. Phyrexians are known for their efficient sustenance, nutrient slurries, high-density compounds, and so forth. This invitation suggests they've gone to considerable lengths to adapt something to Terran tastes. Huang frowned. Adapted or not, Phyrexians have a habit of testing boundaries. Be cautious, Captain. Caution's my middle name, Reeves replied, standing. When do I leave? Immediately, Patel said, sliding a data pad across the table. You'll rendezvous with the Nova Run, which will transport you to the trading hub where the Haste Hamitvak, or Mediator's Grace, is docked. From there, Zixthar will host the dinner aboard the Anshi Ors vessel. Reeves picked up the datapad, nodding firmly. Understood. I'll represent humanity to the best of my ability. The Nova Run was a sleek diplomatic vessel, its interiors designed with understated elegance to host dignitaries and emissaries on sensitive missions. Reeves stood on the observation deck as the ship approached the sprawling galactic trading hub. Its vast rings spun in quiet harmony, dotted with ships of every conceivable design. Among them was the Hased Hamitvak, the Ansior vessel, where Reeves's mission would truly begin. She reviewed her briefing one last time, her fingers lightly brushing the screen of her datapad. Zixthar's profile detailed a calculated and disciplined diplomat, one who thrived on formality and precision. She reviewed her briefing one last time, her fingers lightly brushing the screen of her datapad. Zixthar's profile detailed a calculated and disciplined diplomat, one who thrived on formality and precision. The invitation itself remained an enigma, an unexpected gesture from a species known more for their guarded strategies than their hospitality. The comm crackled to life, the pilot's voice steady but clipped. Captain Reeves, we're on final approach to the trading hub. Docking in 10 minutes. Reeves straightened her jacket and took a steadying breath, her expression resolute. Whatever Zixthar had planned, she was ready. Humanity's reputation, and perhaps more, was on the line. The Hased Hamitvak was a masterpiece of neutral ground, Its corridors shimmered with metallic sheen of unaligned craftsmanship, the kind of work that could only be afforded by systems too rich to pick a side in galactic politics. Captain Morgan Reeves walked with measured steps towards the private dining chamber, her polished boots clicking softly against the pristine floor. The invitation had been unexpected. Zixthar, the Virexian diplomat, was known for his sharp words and sharper maneuvering. A private dinner, especially one framed as an act of goodwill, was highly irregular. Reeves adjusted her uniform collar as she approached the heavy doors. She had been briefed extensively on Virexian customs, enough to know that this meeting likely had strings attached. The only question was how thick those strings were. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room that spoke volumes about Zixthar's precision. The table was a single stretch of polished obsidian, its surface reflecting the gentle glow of bioluminescent plants arranged tastefully along the edges. Virexians appreciated controlled displays of grandeur, and this room was no exception. At the far end stood Zixthar. His chitinous frame gleamed under the soft light, the patterns on his exoskeleton shifting slightly as they moved. His antennae twitched in what Reeves assumed was anticipation.
"Captain Reeves,"
Zixthar said, his voice carrying the peculiar cadence of Virexian diplomacy. The sound of his mandibles clicking punctuated his words, adding an undercurrent of tension to the otherwise gracious tone.
"Welcome. It is a privilege to host you in this chamber."
Reeves smiled as she stepped inside, her hands loosely clasped behind her back. "The privilege is mine, Zixthar. Your hospitality is impressive." She let her gaze drift to the table. Then the glowing flora. "I take it this isn't standard hegemony decor?" Zixthar tilted his head slightly, his antennae bending forward.
"A setting befitting an honored guest. Humanity's efforts in recent galactic events have not gone unnoticed. I wished to extend a gesture of respect."
Reeves held her smile, though the words set off quiet alarms in her mind. Virexian diplomacy was rarely about respect. It was about strength. She gestured towards the lone chair at the table. "A private dinner, too? You're making me feel like a head of state instead of just a captain." Zixthar's mandibles clicked softly.
"You underestimate your importance. Humanity's unique approach to galactic relations has earned you many admirers."
"And critics," Reeves added lightly, moving to her seat. "Still, it's nice to be recognized for our efforts, even if we tend to ruffle a few feathers, or mandibles, along the way." Zixthar gave what might have been a low chuckle, though it sounded more like a series of faint pops.
"Indeed, your species' directness is both admirable and disconcerting at times."
He gestured toward the table as Reeves sat down.
"I trust your journey here was without incident."
"Smooth as silk," Reeves replied. "The Nova Run's crew made sure of that. You know how humans are. We like to come prepared." The faintest twitch of Zixthar's antennae betrayed something akin to unease.
"Preparation is a trait we also value greatly. One must always anticipate unexpected variables."
Reeves nodded, leaning back slightly in her chair. "Sounds like you spent some time studying humans." Zixthar's mandible shifted subtly.
"The hegemony considers all rivals, or potential allies, worthy of study."
The pointedness of the statement wasn't lost on Reeves, but she chose not to bite. Instead, she let her eyes wander back to the glowing plants. "It's a beautiful arrangement. What are those? Bioluminescent, right?" Zixthar's posture shifted slightly, pride evident in the straightening of his spine.
"They are Corithian blooms, native to Virexia Prime. Their light serves as both illumination and deterrent against pests. They symbolize vigilance and clarity.
Reeves raised an eyebrow. Illumination and deterrence. I like that. A bit of a lighthouse back on Earth.
A lighthouse?
It's a structure used to guide ships safely to shore while warning them of dangerous waters. Light has both a beacon and a warning. Zixthar tilted his head, his antennae twitching thoughtfully.
An intriguing parallel. It is no wonder your kind has adapted so effectively to the void of space.
Reeves gave a slight shrug. Adaptation's kind of our thing. She gestured vaguely at the room. I have to say, this whole setup speaks to a lot of thoughtfulness. You've clearly gone out of your way.
It is only proper,
Zixthar replied, moving towards a smaller table set off to the side. Their clawed hands moved with precision as they adjusted something atop it.
Diplomacy thrives on gestures of respect.
Reeves leaned forward slightly, curiosity flickering in her eyes. So, what's on the menu? Your message said it's something special. Zixthar turned back to her, his tone shifting into what Reeves recognized as performative graciousness.
Captain, I have prepared a Krathor feast, a dish revered on my home world. Naturally, it has been adjusted to suit your physiology.
The faint stress on your physiology caught Reeves' attention, though she kept her expression neutral. A Krathor feast. Sounds ceremonial.
It is a dish of great significance, though I regret that I will not partake in it with you.
Zixthar gestured toward a small, opaque container beside them.
Our nutritional requirements differ greatly. My sustenance is far less palatable to your refined senses.
Reeves smirked, leaning back in her chair. No worries. I've heard about your nutrient slurry. Not exactly a fine dining experience, huh? Zixthar's mandibles clicked faintly, though whether in irritation or amusement Reeves couldn't tell.
Efficient,
they replied curtly.
Not indulgent.
Well, Reeves said, I appreciate you going out of your way to make something human-friendly. You've got my attention. Zixthar inclined his head again.
Then let us begin.
The Krathor feast was unveiled with theatrical precision, steam rising in elegant curls from the vibrant dish. Captain Morgan Reeves leaned forward in her seat, her eyes widening slightly as she took in the meticulous presentation. Wow, Reeves said, her voice carrying a note of genuine surprise. That's stunning. It almost feels like I should be taking a picture of it instead of eating it. Zixthar's multifaceted eyes glinted, his movements deliberate.
Your appreciation is noted, Captain. This is an honored variation of the Krathor feast, adapted specifically for your robust Terran constitution. No effort was spared in preparing a meal worthy of your unique biology.
Reeves chuckled lightly, picking up the utensils laid neatly beside her plate. You make it sound like a science experiment, but honestly, if it tastes half as good as it looks, I'm in for a treat. Zixthar's posture remained composed as they gestured subtly towards the dish.
It is a custom to provide what will be most appreciated by one's guest.
I appreciate you going out of your way for a little indulgence on my account, Reeves said, slicing into one of the brightly colored portions of the dish. This really does look amazing. Sure you don't want a bite? You're missing out. Zixthar straightened slightly, his tone unwavering.
I would be unable to appreciate its complexity. Please, enjoy it as intended.
Reeves smiled, spearing a piece with her fork. All right, you convinced me. She lifted the morsel and studied it for a moment, as though bracing herself for an unknown adventure. The first bite was slow, deliberate, her expression thoughtful as she chewed. Zixtar's gaze remained fixed on her, though he made an effort to appear casual. Reeves set her fork down after swallowing, exhaling sharply. Whoa, that's got a kick to it. Zixtar leaned in slightly.
The heat is not overwhelming?
Oh, it's hot, Reeves said, her grin broadening. But it's the kind of heat that grows on you. The balance of flavors is incredible. I wasn't expecting it to be this layered. Zixtar's antenna gave the faintest twitch, a gesture Reeves barely noticed as she eagerly took another bite.
I am gratified that you find it agreeable. The spices were carefully calibrated to complement your physiology.
Calibrated? Reeves repeated with a laugh. You make it sound like a starship diagnostic. Hey, whatever works. This is fantastic. As Reeves continued eating, she occasionally dabbed at her brow with the provided napkin, her cheeks faintly flushed from the spice. Zixtar's claws flexed slightly against the edge of the table as he watched, his mind racing.
The acids alone should have elicited discomfort by now. The capsaicin content is far beyond tolerable levels.
They studied the human carefully, noting the perspiration and deep breaths.
Perhaps they are masking their distress. Perhaps.
Reeves interrupted his thoughts with an appreciative groan of approval. Oh, this sauce! What's in it? Citrus, right?
The base is derived from a fruit native to Phyrexia Prime,
Zixtar replied, his voice steady.
Its acidity enhances the dish's complexity.
Well, it works, Reeves said, nodding as she took another bite. I could see this being a big hit back home. You ever consider franchising? Zixtar's claws tightened briefly before relaxing.
The preparation is highly specific and requires rare ingredients. Replicating it outside of our world would be challenging.
That's a shame, Reeves said, polishing off another morsel. You got something special here. Zixtar leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but probing.
I am curious, Captain. Do all humans possess such enthusiasm for potent flavors?
Reeves paused, resting her fork on the plate. Not all, but a lot of us do. Spicy food's a bit of a cultural staple in some places. There's even this thing back home called the Carolina Reaper. It's a type of pepper so hot, people compete to see how much they can handle. You'd think they were punishing themselves, but they keep coming back for more. Zixtar stared at her for a moment, his mind struggling to reconcile the information.
Deliberate exposure to toxins, and it doesn't kill them?
Reeves laughed at her own memory. I tried it once. I spent the rest of the day regretting it, but hey, you know what? Worth it. It's part of the fun.
Fun,
Zixtar repeated slowly, as though testing the word. Yeah, Reeves said, her grin widening. Humans are weird like that. We like a little challenge on our plate. Zixtar straightened again, his tone remaining polite but distant.
Your adaptability is most remarkable.
You say that like it's a bad thing, Reeves teased, taking another bite. Oh, come on! You must have something similar in Phyrexian cuisine. I bet you got your own spicy dishes.
Our diet is designed to optimize function,
Zixtar said, his voice carefully measured.
Such indulgences are unnecessary.
Well, I'm glad you made an exception for me, Reeves replied. She gestured toward the container by Zixtar's side. But hey, I don't want to keep you from your meal. Nutrient slurry waits for no one, right? Zixtar hesitated for the briefest moments before replying.
My nourishment is already accounted for. This evening is dedicated to your experience.
Reeves raised her glass in a light-hearted toast. Well then, it's a cultural exchange, and to one hell of a dinner. Zixtar nodded faintly, but his thoughts were a storm of uncertainty.
How much longer until the toxins take effect? Surely even a species as resilient as theirs cannot endure indefinitely.
Reeves, oblivious to her host's unease, leaned back with a satisfied sigh. You've outdone yourself, Zixthar. I gotta say, diplomacy never tasted so good. Reeves wiped the corner of her mouth with the napkin, leaning back slightly in the chair, clearly impressed. I've gotta ask, how does this stack up against your usual meals? Is Crathor always this extravagant, or am I being spoiled here? Zixthar clasped his claws together, his expression neutral.
The Crathor feast is an uncommon offering, Captain. It is prepared with great care for exceptional circumstances. Most Viraxians would not consider it part of their routine fare.
Reeves raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. Uncommon, huh? What makes it so special?
It is rooted in tradition, Zixthar replied smoothly, his tone calm. The preparation itself is an intricate process, though its significance lies more in the gesture than the consumption. Such dishes are not part of our standard nourishment.
Let me guess, Reeves said with a grin. Your everyday meals are more straightforward. Nutrient slurries and all that.
That is correct, Zixthar replied. Our sustenance is optimized for function over extravagance. It is not a matter of indulgence, but efficiency.
Reeves chuckled, swirling her glass thoughtfully. Sounds a lot more like our astronaut food. Keeps you alive, sure, but it's not exactly something you'd serve at a dinner party. Zixthar allowed a slight tilt of his head, the Viraxian equivalent of a polite acknowledgement.
Your appreciation of the Crathor feast suggests our efforts to accommodate Terran preferences were well placed.
Oh, definitely, Reeves said, her grin widening. But it's hard to believe that you don't have some version of this for yourselves. You're missing out. Zixthar's claws tightened imperceptibly in his lap before he replied, his voice steady.
Oh, we have our own version. As humans say, it is to die for. But tonight is about you. The feast is only meant for one.
Reeves nodded, apparently satisfied with the explanation, and leaned back with a contented sigh. Well, you set the bar pretty high, Zixthar. I don't think anything back home's gonna top this. Zixthar offered a faint nod, though his thoughts churned beneath his composed exterior.
Let them believe it is a gesture of diplomacy. The less they question, the better. The toxin should have immobilized them by now, yet they are here speaking of how delicious it was.
Reeves, unaware of the host's internal struggle, leaned forward again, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. So, again, if Viraxian cuisine isn't about indulgence, what's your go-to meal? Is it always the nutrient slurry? Zixthar hesitated.
Our standard sustenance is optimized for efficiency. The slurry you referenced provides all necessary elements for survival without the distraction of flavor.
Reeves winced playfully. Man, can't imagine going without flavor. She took another bite, savoring the layered heat and tang of the dish. This, though? This could convert me to Viraxian food. Your people have some serious culinary skills, Zixthar.
You find the heat tolerable?
Zixthar asked, his voice betraying the faintest tremor. Tolerable? Reeves repeated, raising an amused eyebrow. It's incredible. The kind of spice that wakes you up and keeps you paying attention to every bite. There's something satisfying about it. She took another mouthful, savoring the complexity. Heat like this adds personality to a meal, you know? Makes it stand out. Zixthar's claws shifted slightly in his lap as he regarded her,
You don't consider such intensity a deterrent?
Reeves shrugged, her grin undiminished. Nah, not humans. We got a knack for leaning into the strong stuff. Whether it's flavor, danger, or a challenge, there's something about testing our limits that's just irresistible. Zixtar stiffened slightly, the concept both alien and unsettling.
Your species voluntarily subjects itself to pain for amusement?
I'm not sure I'd call it amusement, Reeves corrected. It's more about pushing limits, seeing how much you can handle. Humans are like that. We like a little challenge with our food. It's fun. Zixtar's claws tightened around the edge of the table.
Fun? They speak of toxins and discomfort as though they are trivialities. Is this what makes their kind so unpredictable? And need to test themselves, even in the face of harm?
Reeves chuckled, pointing her fork at Zixtar. You should try it sometime. I bet you'd surprise yourself.
I believe I will refrain,
Zixtar replied carefully. He watched Reeves closely as she polished off the last bite, a bead of sweat glistening on her brow.
Surely this is the limit. They cannot withstand more.
Reeves leaned back with a satisfied sigh. All right, I gotta ask. Any chance there's more? I could eat this all day. Zixtar faltered.
More? You wish to continue?
Absolutely, Reeves said, her grin wide. You can't bring out something this good and expect me to stop at one plate. For the first time, Zixtar felt a distinct crack in their composure.
It would be unwise to overindulge,
they said carefully. Reeves raised an eyebrow. Come on, Zixtar. You got more back there, don't you? The Varexian hesitated before rising from their seat.
If you insist, Captain.
They moved toward the side table where the additional portions were kept, his claws trembling faintly.
They must be bluffing. No one could endure such concentrated exposure without consequence. Perhaps they seek to test me in turn.
Returning to the table, Zixtar set the second plate before Reeves with deliberate grace.
Another serving,
he said, his tone tight.
It is unusual to see such enthusiasm for our cuisine.
Well, you've earned it, Reeves said, already cutting into the new portion. I gotta say, you might just make a diplomat out of me yet. Zixtar sat down, their gaze fixed on the human as she ate with unabated enthusiasm. Initially, his thoughts were in disarray.
If this does not stop them, then what will? Perhaps they are not as they appear. Perhaps.
You know, Reeves said between bites, if you ever wanted to market this back on Earth, you'd make a killing. I mean, you'd have to tone down the spice for the rookies, but people like me, instant favorite.
You believe this dish would thrive among your kind?
Zixtar asked, his voice faintly strained. Without a doubt, Reeves said, smiling. You got something special here, Zixtar. Zixtar stared at her, his claws tightening subtly in his lap.
Special? This is poison. How do they not see? How do they endure?
When Reeves set her fork down again, she glanced at Zixtar with a playful smirk. So, any chance I can get the recipe? Or is that state secret?
The recipe is complex,
Zixtar said, his voice stiff.
Its components are rare and cannot be easily replicated outside of Virexia Prime.
Figures, Reeves said with a shrug. I guess I'll just have to keep coming back for more. Zixtar's antenna flickered faintly, a deep unease settling over them.
More? How can they still hunger for more? What manner of creature thrives on what should destroy them?
Reeves leaned back in her chair, exhaling contentedly as she set her utensils down. Her empty plate gleamed, the vibrant sauces and elaborate presentation consumed with relish. "Well, 6-star," she began, her tone warm and genuine. "I gotta say, that was one of the best meals I have ever had. You didn't just hit it out of the park, you sent it into orbit." 6-star inclined his head in acknowledgement, his claws folded neatly in his lap.
"It pleases me to know that you found the meal satisfactory, Captain. The chefs were instructed to ensure every detail met Terran standards."
"They did more than meet 'em," Reeves said, leaning forward slightly. "They set a whole new bar. I mean, this wasn't just a meal. It was an experience. Honestly, I'm tempted to try and replicate it back on the ship. Can I please get the recipe?" The request landed like a disruptor charge. 6-star's antenna twitched minutely as they weighed the implications. Sharing the recipe was unthinkable. The ingredients, carefully chosen for their toxicity, were never intended to leave the hands of the Virexian scientists. Revealing the details would invite scrutiny, and likely uncover their true intentions.
"The recipe,"
6-star began, his voice carefully controlled,
"is highly specific. Its preparation relies on ingredients unique to Virexia Prime, many of which are sacred to our people. It would not be feasible to replicate it elsewhere."
Reeves tilted her head, her expression a mix of intrigue and amusement. "Sacred ingredients? You Virexians take food seriously."
"It is not merely food,"
6-star replied, keeping his tone steady.
"The components hold cultural and ceremonial significance. Sharing them would be inappropriate."
"Oh, I get it," Reeves said, grinning. "Trade secrets and all that. Makes sense. It's a shame. I'd love to see what my crew thinks of this dish. They'd lose their minds." 6-star felt the tightening in his chest, though his exterior remained composed.
"Lose their minds, indeed. They would uncover the truth within moments. This cannot be allowed."
Reeves gestured lightly towards the table. "Well, I guess I'll just have to come visit Virexia myself someday. Get the real deal straight from the source." The casual statement struck 6-star like a physical blow.
"A visit would require considerable preparation,"
he said slowly. The thought of Terrans exploring their homeworld was deeply unsettling. Reeves laughed, apparently misreading the hesitation. "Okay, don't worry. I'll make sure to give you plenty of notice." 6-star gave a slight nod, though his thoughts churned.
"No, they must not come closer. They must not discover how little separates a diplomatic gesture from an assassination."
As Reeves poured herself a glass of water, 6-star observed her closely, his claws flexing lightly beneath the table. The human's face was flushed, beads of perspiration still glistening faintly on her forehead. Yet her demeanor remained impossibly casual, as though nothing was amiss.
"How can this be? The acids should have begun to dissolve their tissues by now. The capsaicin alone is at levels beyond tolerance. And yet, they smile. They praise. Do they possess some resilience that defies all reason?"
Reeves interrupted his thoughts, taking another sip before setting the glass down. "You know, it's not just the flavors that impress me. It's the way the whole dish came together. Balanced, complex, and, let's be honest, spicy enough to make me sweat." She grinned. "Not that I'm complaining." Reeves leaned forward slightly, resting her elbow on the table. "So, tell me, what's the story behind the Krathor feast?"
"It is a ceremonial dish reserved for intense diplomatic negotiations,"
6-star replied carefully.
"It is tailored to the individual we are meeting with, designed to ease negotiations." This version was supposed to be adapted specifically for Terran tastes.
Well, whoever came up with the adaptation deserves a medal, Reeves said, her grin widening. This wasn't just food, it was art. You Phyrexians really know how to make an impression. Zixthar inclined his head, though his thoughts spiraled deeper into doubt.
An impression, yes, but not the one intended. How does this human endure? How do they thrive where others would perish?
Reeves's expression turned playful again as she gestured toward the empty plate. Are you sure I can't twist your arm for just a hint of the recipe? I promise not to tell anyone. Zixthar straightened slightly, his voice firm.
I must decline, Captain. The recipe is too complex to replicate without proper guidance and proper ingredients.
Fair enough, Reeves said, leaning back with an easy shrug. I guess I'll just have to keep dreaming about it. But seriously, Zixthar, you've set a new standard for diplomacy. Food might be the universal language after all. Zixthar gave a faint nod, though his mind remained in turmoil.
If this is diplomacy, what will the species do when pushed to extremes? If they can endure this, what else are they capable of?
Reeves, oblivious to her host's growing unease, reached for her water glass once more, her expression relaxed and content. Anyways, thanks for the meal, and the company. You've definitely earned a 5-star review. Zixthar sat motionless as the human's words washed over him.
5 stars? No! They are not rating a meal. They are rating a test. And I am the one who has failed.
Zixthar paced the length of the hall on board the Mediator's Grace, his feet clicking softly against the floor. His thoughts churned as he replayed every detail of the evening. The humans had eaten the Krathor feast, not merely eaten it, but enjoyed it, praised it, asked for seconds. It was a complete and utter failure. He activated the secure communications channel, summoning the one person he trusted to offer an explanation. After a brief pause, the screen lit up to the visage of Krathin, a scientist of the Phyrexian caste. Krathin's antennae twitched curiously as he regarded Zixthar.
Zixthar,
Krathin said, his tone formal.
I was not expecting a transmission at this hour. Is the situation resolved? No,
Zixthar replied sharply, his frustration evident.
The plan failed, utterly.
Krathin tilted his head, his claws coming together in thought.
Failed? Elaborate. The human consumed the Krathor feast,
Zixthar said, his mandibles clicking with restrained anger.
They displayed no adverse effects. None. Instead, they praised it, requested more, and they asked for the recipe.
Krathin froze, his antennae rising sharply.
They asked for the recipe. That cannot be correct. It is correct,
Zixthar snapped.
They ate the entire plate, requested seconds, and spoke of its balance of flavors. How is this possible? The acids, the capsaicin, the sodium levels. It should have incapacitated them.
Krathin sat back, his antennae twitching as he processed the information.
I do not have an immediate explanation. Those components and those quantities, they are lethal to most known species. To humans, perhaps.
He trailed off, his claws tapping absently against the console.
Perhaps what?
Zixthar demanded, his voice rising.
Perhaps they have an unrecognized biological resilience,
Krathin said slowly.
Their physiology has already proven atypical in prior observations. Strength derived from an internal skeleton. Rapid adaptability to environmental stressors.
He paused, his antenna twitching again.
But this is unprecedented.
Zixthar sank into a nearby chair, his claws digging into the armrests.
You're telling me we poisoned them with what should have been a lethal concoction, and yet they treated it like a delicacy?
It would seem so,
Kratheen admitted, his tone tinged with disbelief.
But why? What could drive such a response?
Zixthar leaned forward, his voice a low growl.
They spoke of something called a chili eating contest. They said consuming dangerous foods is a form of entertainment.
Entertainment?
Kratheen's mandibles opened slightly in astonishment.
They seek out discomfort for amusement.
Apparently.
Zixthar's tone was bitter.
They described it as fun.
Kratheen was silent for a long moment, his antennae drooping slightly as realization began to dawn.
It seems the Terrans are uniquely suited to endure what others cannot. What we intended as a weapon, they perceived as a challenge.
Zixthar let out a sharp exhale, his claws tightening further against the chair.
And now they want the recipe. If they analyze it, if they uncover its true purpose,
then our intentions will be exposed.
Kratheen finished grimly.
We could lose not only the humans' trust, but any leverage we might have hoped to gain.
The two Varexians sat in silence, the weight of their failure hanging heavily in the air. The following morning, Zixthar received a notification on his personal console. The message header read, "Thanks for dinner." With a growing sense of dread, he opened it. Reeves' cheerful tone was apparent even in text. "Zixthar, just wanted to say thanks again for last night's meal. The crew couldn't believe the story when I told them. It's already legendary. We even tried recreating the Krathor feast ourselves. Attached is a photo of our first attempt. They loved it, but they said it could use a bit more spice." The attached photo showed Reeves standing in the ship's galley alongside a Terran chef. On the counter before them was a vibrant dish that bore a crude resemblance to the Krathor feast. The plating was clumsy, the colors less vibrant, but the enthusiasm on their faces was unmistakable. Zixthar stared at the image, trembling with a mixture of humiliation and disbelief.
"More spice,"
he muttered, his voice filled with exasperation. He stood abruptly, pacing the room as his thoughts spiraled.
"They consumed poison, asked for more, and now they improve upon it."
He stopped, staring out at the endless void beyond the viewport.
"Humans,"
he muttered, shaking his head.
"They are impossible."
The Terran council chamber exuded its usual sense of quiet authority as Captain Morgan Reeves entered, her footsteps soft against the polished stone floor. The counselors, seated at their semicircular bench, looked up from their data displays as she approached the central podium. Her mission to meet with Zixthar, the Varexian diplomat, had been closely monitored, and her report was eagerly anticipated. Reeves placed her datapad on the podium, offering the counselors a polite nod. "Counselors?" she began, her tone calm and professional. "The meeting with Zixthar was a success. The Varexian diplomat's hospitality exceeded all expectations, and I believe we've made progress in fostering mutual respect." "Hospitality?" Counselor Patel asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's not a word often associated with the Varexians. Elaborate." Reeves smiled faintly. "Zixthar hosted a private dinner aboard the Mediator's Grace, serving a dish adapted specifically for human physiology. It was called the Krathor Feast, a traditional Varexian meal reimagined for Terran tastes." Counselor Huang leaned forward slightly. "Reimagined? What was the result?" "The dish was extraordinary," Reeves replied with enthusiasm. "Vibrant colors, bold flavors, and an intensity I wasn't expecting. It was spicy, acidic, and heavily seasoned. Far more complex than anything I imagined Varexians could create." Counselor Osai tilted her head. "Spicy and acidic? That seems at odds with what we know of their nutritional requirements." Reeves nodded. "That's what surprised me the most. Varexians are known for their efficient, utilitarian diets, and yet this dish was a sensory overload." I asked Zixtar about it, and he explained that it was adapted for humans, elevated with flavors and components that their own physiology doesn't require. And you consumed it without issue? Counselor Patel asked, her tone probing. Not only did I consume it, I enjoyed it, Reeves said with a chuckle. I even asked for seconds. The balance of heat and acidity was unlike anything I've had before. It reminded me of Earth's spiciest dishes. Intense, but deeply satisfying. Counselor Osai raised an eyebrow. Seconds. I take it the Vrexian adaptation was a success? Absolutely, Reeves said, her grin widening. Though I think I might have surprised Zixlar with how much I enjoyed it. He seemed taken aback when I asked for the recipe. The counselor exchanged glances, a few smiling faintly. Counselor Huang tapped his datapad. And did he provide it? Reeves shook her head. No, he claimed the recipes relied on rare ingredients from Vrexia Prime, many of which are considered sacred. I think it was more about preserving cultural exclusivity than anything else, but I respected his decision. Counselor Patel steepled her fingers, her expression thoughtful. What do you make of this dish, Captain? Was it simply a gesture of goodwill? Goodwill, yes, Reeves said, but also a fascinating insight into their culture. The fact that they went to such lengths to adapt something for us shows that they're interested in building bridges. It also highlights a curiosity about our culinary preferences. Zixtar admitted that the dish's intensity was specifically calibrated to appeal to human tastes. Counselor Osai's eyes narrowed slightly. Calibrated? Do you think that the Vrexians are testing us in some way? Reeves shook her head firmly. Not at all, Counselor. If anything, I think they underestimated our capacity to enjoy such intense flavors. Humans have a history of embracing food as a challenge. Spicy dishes, acidic drinks, even excessive salt content. What other species might find overwhelming, we often celebrate. And the Vrexians? Patel asked. Did Zixtar partake in this meal? No, Reeves replied. He explained that their physiology is too different to enjoy such adaptations. He consumed his standard nutrient slurry instead. I did joke about it, though. Something about him missing out. The council chuckled lightly at that. Captain, Huang said, leaning back slightly. What do you recommend, based on this experience? Reeves smiled. I recommend we lean into this opportunity. The Vrexians clearly respect effort, precision, and attention to detail. At our next diplomatic event, I suggest we bring elements of Terran cuisine to the table. Something bold, unique, and undeniably human. It's clear that they've taken an interest in our tastes, and I think that curiosity is worth cultivating. Patel nodded slowly, her gaze sharp. An intriguing suggestion. What would you propose? Reeve considered for a moment. Something surprising. Perhaps a selection of Earth's regional dishes. Things that showcase not just our flavors, but our cultural diversity. If the Krathor feast taught me anything, it's that food can be a powerful bridge between species. The council exchanged thoughtful glances, their expressions a mix of approval and interest. Your report is thorough and enlightening, Captain, Patel said finally. If the Vrexians are as intrigued by us as you suggest, this may be the beginning of a stronger diplomatic relationship. Well done. Thank you, Counselor, Reeves replied, her tone warm. It's an honor to represent humanity in these conversations. And, if I may say so, diplomacy has never tasted better. The council laughed softly at her remark as she stepped back from the podium. As Reeves exited the chamber, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The dinner might have been unexpected, but it had opened a door that she was eager to step through. Humanity's ability to adapt and connect had once again proven its worth.